Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Erica Jackson, but you can call me E for short, or I'm sorry, Miss Jackson. Yes, you can also call me Miss Jackson. um, I want to tell you all a little bit about myself and about my home journey or my unhoused journey so you can understand why this topic is so important to me. So I spent the first 12 years of my childhood with my mother and my three sisters, and it was a pretty stable childhood until I turned 12. I spent the next 5 years navigating an unstable life throughout the foster care system. By the time I was 17, I was emancipated and considered an adult by the courts. And although I was considered an adult by the courts, I still lived with family and friends for a long time. After graduating from high school, I was put into transitional housing by the foster care system. And that is what my introduction to living on my own and as a tenant was like. I did pretty well in that program. I lived well on my own. However, I broke one of the rules of not allowing people to spend the night. And I had a boyfriend, and I allowed my boyfriend to get me kicked out of the transitional housing. So from that time on, I spent the next 2 to 3 years from fresh out of high school to like the next few years navigating life homeless. And we spent about 6 months to a year living in a car and showering at friends' house in the daytime and sleeping in the car at night. I also lived in my friends' dorm rooms and slept on couches. So I've pretty much experienced all different types of crashing at people's places and trying to find shelter. In about 2010, I found out I was pregnant, and I asked my mom, after 9 years of not living with her, if I could live with her. And she did let me come for a brief time, but she had this golden rule when we were growing up that if any of her girls came home pregnant, we wouldn't be able to live there. And so although she did let me live there for a brief time, she took the liberty of looking into some women's shelters that would help me find permanent housing as I became a mother myself. So we found a shelter. There was a program that called HOPIX, and it is still relatively active right now. And HOPIX required that I live there for 4 months. And then in the end, I would be provided permanent housing. In the meantime, I stayed with my mom. And when I finished the 4 months, my son was delivered. I went to labor at the shelter. I brought my infant to the shelter. But when the 4 months was over, the permanent housing was not quite ready yet. So I had to go back to my mom's in the meantime. In this slide here, you'll see 3 locations. The first one on the left is the first place that I had as an adult and a mother in living on my own as a tenant in Los Angeles. This is located right off of 25th in Vermont, and it was the first place that I was able to secure permanent housing with as an adult. It was a 2-bedroom, 1 bath, and I lived upstairs. Me and my son did really well here for the first few months as a tenant, but quickly we started to see roaches in the house. I'm a new mom. I have a young son that's learning how to crawl and learning how to walk. And it became devastating because I was afraid of what could happen, that my growing boy was being exposed to roaches that carry diseases. This small thing quickly became an infestation. Oh, okay, sorry. I don't know what happened there. Okay.
Yeah, I don't know why it just kicked you out.
I don't know either.
Nice.
Technical difficulties, that shall be.
Francesca said it's all right. Take your time.
Okay, thank you. Okay, where were we? Okay, So yeah, that small issue soon became an infestation. And I'm talking about massive infestation where I totally felt uncomfortable with living there. My utility bills began to go up because I just didn't feel comfortable sleeping there at night. I began calling the health department and anything to help me living in my apartment with my infant son more comfortable. But the health department has this thing where they come out and they expect units, and it has to be during business hours, 9 to 5. And if you've ever experienced an infestation problem, they usually don't come out until after hours. So the infestation did not line up with the inspection hours, and therefore the health department was not able to see the issue as big as it was for me. So we went through this cycle of calling the health department, having the landlord bring an exterminator, and ultimately it was never remedied. So I began looking for another location. This house in the middle was the second location that I lived. I was actually really happy to have this location because, as you can see, I went from living in an apartment building where I was subjected to the living conditions of other people to just having a space of my own. It was a duplex. So this side of the house that has a bush in front of it is a single, where at least 3 different occupants resided throughout my 5 years of residency here. This house has a front yard, a backyard, a driveway, and a garage. And it allowed my son, who was a growing boy, to have a neighborhood where he can play, have neighbors, and really have like a full childhood growing up. We did really well at this residence, and I really enjoyed living here until I started to have a major decline in my mental health. And upon that decline, I went to look for resources and help, and I was evaluated and told that one of the things that could help with my rehabilitation was securing an emotional support animal. I chose a dog, and she is an English Mastiff. And at the time of getting her, she was a little baby. But if you know anything about an English Mastiff, they grow quickly and they grow rapidly, like rapidly big. And so the people who lived in the small unit were very uncomfortable. My dog didn't do anything, but it was just the sight of a large dog that a lot of people felt uncomfortable with. In conclusion, the landlord started to harass me, and he wanted to make me living there uncomfortable. And mind you, I was so happy to live here. My son had a yard to play in, my dog had a backyard to run around, and everybody just felt as if this was our home and a place where we could call home for as long as we couldn't. But I had to take that landlord to court for harassment, and we settled out in court. We settled out in court, and I was told that I would be given $5,000 as long as I moved in 60 days. So as a new mom, I wanted to just secure a place for myself and my son. I did not know that after living there for 5 years, how hard the housing market had gotten. It was absolutely difficult to secure permanent housing after leaving this place. But if you look here on the far right, there is an apartment building that I was able to secure the permanent housing with. The only problem was when leaving the second place, the third place was not available in time. So it turned out that we ended up using the money that for settlement to put our things in storage and to pay for hotels until this place was available. And although we lived there the last home off 90th and Figueroa, although we lived there for 5 years, I will tell you that living there, the conditions of the inside, the crime on the outside made life extremely hard for me and my son. And it literally exhausted my mental health. It was the hardest time of my life to live at this location, but we'll continue. Here we go. Yay, Section 8 call for my appointment to come in, and my birthday is next week. Now it's definitely time for a celebration. On January 5th, 12 years ago, I got my Section 8, AKA what you all have been hearing me address as the permanent housing. So when I went to the shelter, this is what the golden ticket was. Waiting to get that golden ticket, the Section 8, and this is literally what society considers Section 8, like a golden ticket. Nevertheless, people wait on a waiting list for 10 years to get a spot. Nevertheless, that when you do get the spot, the application process is long and strenuous. And never mind the fact that once you are on the program, there's so many unlimited ways that you can be kicked off the program. But yet, I was happy. I have secured and maintained the Section 8 for 12 years. I still currently have it, but society says this is the golden ticket, but we'll look into that a little bit more. So I also wanted to talk about the different types of housing before we go too much into being unhoused. I wanted to talk a little bit about the housing. So a lot of people look forward to being homeowners. And I put this at the top because if you can secure a home, then ultimately it will pay you back in the end. Everybody is able to get equity from homes if you maintain it long enough. And obviously that's security for your family. Nobody has to worry about being homeless when you own where you live. The second category is going to be property owners and developers, and those are people who purchase the land. They might not live on the land, but they purchase it and they call it their own, and then they rent and utilize that space either for residential or commercial things. And as you can see, the list goes on and on as to what that space can be used for. Mobile homes, RVs, manufactured homes, trailer parks, and even boats are ways that people are able to purchase a thing, but you're still tied into paying someone else for that space. For a trailer park, you have to pay to have your trailer there. For a boat, you have to pay for docking and so forth. And then you have shelters. Shelters is like the community living spaces that people live in, even jails and foster homes, group homes. And in those shelters, the people who live there might not have to pay, but maybe taxpayers or the government might pay for that living space. And then at the bottom, it's the unsheltered with encampments, vans, and primarily outdoors. That's when people go homeless. So what is Section 8? Does anybody in the chat right now or in this presentation, is anybody on Section 8 other than myself? Okay.
No, but I wish I was.
Doesn't look like anybody is. That's okay. Do you all happen to know anybody other than myself who is on Section 8?
Yeah, quite a few people.
Okay. Of those people, did anybody have to wait on a waiting list for their Section 8? If so, how long?
One friend of mine applied in 1986 and got her apartment in 1994. And that's when the waiting list was fairly short.
Thank you so much for sharing, Larry. So we'll dive more into Section 8. I just wanted to get an idea if how many people were aware of the program and knew anybody on it. So what is Section 8?
I want to say Annette also said that the people that she knows are still on the list after a decade.
Yes, we're going to talk about that. Thank you so much for sharing that, Annette. Let me see, how do I minimize? Okay. So what is Section 8? Section 8 is a portion of the Housing Act of 1937, designed to provide financial assistance to the states and political subdivisions thereof to eliminate unsafe and unsanitary housing conditions, for the eradication of slums, for the provision of decent, safe, and sanitary dwellings for families of low income, and for the reduction of unemployment and the stimulation of business activity to create a U.S. housing authority and for other purposes. The Section 8 of the Federal Housing Act allows subsidies to be paid by the government to local agencies to improve the living conditions for low-income families. So let's just pause for a second, and I would like for you guys to keep in mind that the Housing Act was designed in 1937. And in its establishing, there were a few things that they had in mind for low-income families. And it was to eliminate unsafe and unsanitary housing conditions, for the eradication of slums, and to provide decent, safe, and sanitary dwellings. So please keep that in the back of your mind, at least for the next 4 slides as we move forward. Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles, also known as HACLA, was established in 1938 as a part of the Housing Act of 1937. To provide better quality living to low-income families, HACLA has grown to become one of the nation's largest and leading public housing authorities, providing the largest supply of quality, affordable housing to residents of the city of Los Angeles. So HACLA, the Housing Authority of the City of Los Angeles, was designed to carry out the mission for the Housing Act of 1937. And as you see here, it says that it is one of the nation's leading public housing authorities that's supplying quality, affordable housing. So the question for myself and many participants is, if everybody is standing on business, as we say in 2024, how is it that so many participants such as myself are forced to live in unsafe, unclean, and the slums of our city? We'll hold that thought, and if you have any feedback, please feel free to add it in the chat and we'll discuss it moving forward. HACLA. So here is a graph of crime stats that was provided by HACLA about crime that was taking place in these cities that's on the graph. Now, I haven't particularly lived in any of these cities directly, but I know that the Nickerson Gardens, the Jordan Downs, and the Imperial Gardens are all relatively close to each other. And my mother has lived near a neighbor to that city since the year 2000. And the numbers here on their chart seems to be alarming, because just being a neighbor to this city, to these areas, then you know that the crime of being a person in the neighborhood is much higher than what HACLA's crime stats seem to show. But we'll move along. So in this graph, I pulled this up from a website called crimegrade.org. This is a map of the greater Los Angeles area. The primary area of Los Angeles is here in the center where all the red is. And obviously you can see the grades at the bottom, and I think they kind of speak for themselves and what they determine. But I will say that the greener areas are the places that grade really, really high in the crime grade, and the places of the Fs is where they are failing in their crime grade, which is primarily all of Los Angeles, central Los Angeles. I will also say that because the Housing Act was designed to allow people of the Section 8 program to live in the areas of lower crime, it is quite interesting as a participant to know that those areas in the green over here where it says Brentwood, over here where it says Buena Park and Whittier and Torrance and Manhattan Beach, we have the hardest time as housing authority participants actually securing housing where the grades are A+ in crimes. But if you go back a few slides, it says that that is what the Housing Act was all about. The Housing Act was designed to provide to us safer, decent, and sanitary locations to live as low-income families. But as a participant and millions of participants in Los Angeles, we know that it is almost impossible to secure housing in those green areas. The places that are available to us as participants of this government-funded housing authority is right here in the red. So let's continue. I took the liberty of looking up my zip code on that crimegrade.org. This is where I lived in the zip code 9003, where I told you my son and I lived from the year 2019 to 2003, where it really took a dramatic decline on my mental health to live in this home. If you can see here, the violent crime in this area has a failing grade. The property crime in this area is almost failing, and other crimes such as kidnapping crimes, drug crimes, and vandalism is also failing. In this slide here, these are the neighboring cities. This first one here, 944, this is where my mom has lived for the last 24 years. They're failing dramatically. In the 947 zip code, that's where I lived in the duplex with the dog, and that one is also failing dramatically. And all these other neighboring cities, as I said, this is all of the Los Angeles area where primarily Section 8 housing is accepted, but we're failing at the crime. So my question to everybody here in participation and in this presentation is it possible that the HACLA organization is being provided the resources that it is because it's providing graphs like this that says, hey, we are providing housing to people, and it's in the safe neighborhoods that the Housing Act designed it to be in. Perhaps if the government or the people who are helping to fund housing for HACLA knew that we actually live in these neighborhoods with the crime grade at a failing rate, then they would understand that a HACLA is not carrying through its mission for the Housing Act of 1937. But let's continue.
You have a comment from Larry. Larry has her hand up.
Okay. Could you read?
Just with respect to HACLA, I have friends in SROs on Skid Row. Skid Row is about a half mile by a half mile. It's a fairly small area, but it accounts for 60% of all crime in central Los Angeles. It is extremely violent and dangerous. And I was talking to one friend of mine who lives at the Sanborn, and HACLA put him in the Sanborn 8 years ago. And the plan with HACLA was, you're going to stay in this SRO for 2 years. And if you stay sober, you adhere to your psychiatrist treatment plan, then we'll get you a Section 8 voucher. And his experience with HACLA, trying to navigate that system, and I've heard this from numerous other people downtown, is that the way my friend said to me the other day, he said, Larry, I feel like I keep jumping over an endless series of hurdles in a maze that goes nowhere. I'll never get out of this place. He wants to get off Skid Row. He would take a Section 8 anywhere. But and I've heard, and what I've heard from other people who are supposed, they've got case managers with either nonprofits or whatever, and about 90% or 95% of the time, it falls through. And for each person working with HACLA or a nonprofit, it falls through for a completely different reason. And it's very seldom downtown that anybody ever gets, it's very difficult. That was just, anyway.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Larry, because as I said, I'm a participant, and fortunately for me, I have not ended up on Skid Row, but it has been very, very hard navigating and jumping the hurdles of HACLA to make sure that I did not end up on Skid Row, but I will attest to the difficulty that your friends and your many friends have said to you that the program is quite difficult. And if you recall in the beginning, I said, when I got the Section 8, I looked at it as Willy Wonka's golden ticket. And I was sure I got the golden ticket, but I have to be honest, it is absolutely difficult and it takes everything. And as a person who struggles with mental health, it is much, much harder to navigate the program, but I'll talk more about that as we dive deeper into the presentation. Does anybody else have any comments before I move forward? Let's see. So I'm going to read Laura. She says, stories like this are all too common here on Long Island, New York too. Section 8 housing has been backlogged since the pandemic and has yet to reopen to take applicants. Absolutely, Laura. Absolutely. And even for participants such as myself, and we'll read that here actually in this slide, we will discuss a lot of why that's happening. So if you guys don't mind, I'm going to move forward to this slide here and just read the first paragraph. Feel free to take screenshots as all of this information was researched and I am able to provide citing at the end of this presentation if you'd like to know where I got my information from. But this here slide was taken from a HACLA report that was provided in 2018. So it says, as of October 26, 2018, HACLA has 1,168 vouchers on the street for new applicants searching for new housing, and an additional 2,490 vouchers for current applicant families who have requested to move. So let's pause for a second, because I really want you guys to understand and grasp the concept of what just this first sentence is saying about this research and the background of HACLA just a few years ago. That new applicants who probably was like Larry's friend who waited almost a decade to get this application, to get this voucher, or like myself, somebody who went to a shelter and abided by a program for a couple months to get on the program. But nevertheless, there are about 1,200 people as of 2018 who were on the street trying to secure this new voucher. And then it says that there are about 2,500 people who are already on the program who are requesting to relocate. I will tell you guys that even though I have secured my voucher for the last 12 years, every time that I look for a new location, whether it's because the place is unsafe or because there's an infestation going on, I always have this repeated cycle of homelessness because the next place that I move will be just as difficult to secure and to find a place that's willing to take the voucher. So I'll read the next sentence, which says, due to a combination of factors, including source of income discrimination, low vacancy rates, and the high cost of housing, present only 53% of Section 8 voucher holders are successful in finding a unit. This is not a 2018 report. This is a current report. I am a current Los Angeles Housing Authority participant that even today, right now, I have a voucher that was provided to me in July of 2023 for me to secure housing. The deadline was December 2023. I was not able to find anything by then. And so I was given an extension until February 19th. And to today, I have not secured that voucher for a new resident. So this issue is ongoing, and I'm sure that even though these numbers are alarming, they have greatly increased now in 2024, including the the rent increase, even for rent stabilized residences. There is a new bill that as of February 1st, 2024, which is tomorrow, rent stabilized units are allowed to add an increase to the already high rent amount. It also says that HACLA every year, and even as a participant, I can attest to that, every year HACLA is increasing. The government is willing to pay a little bit more every year on the vouchers to support people's rent payments. But nevertheless, if you look at the bottom here, Although the rent that the government is willing to supplement for us is increasingly going up, the participants of the landlords that are willing to accept this are dramatically declining. And I'm sure now in 2024, that number is a lot less than 13,000. Excuse me. In this next slide, which is page 4 of the Hackler report, it says the study looked at 5 states, Washington, D.C., Los Angeles County, except for 13 small cities, Fort Worth, Philadelphia, and Newark. Researchers screened over 341,000 online advertisements and had testers call up landlords and track their interactions with potential voucher holding tenants. So there's this test. There's a bunch of places online that says, hey, this place is available. They have these testers go in and pretend like they are us, the participants. And in this second paragraph, you will see that in Fort Worth, 78%. In Los Angeles, 76.4%. The 2 places, the 2 cities without legal protections for voucher renters. Philadelphia, 66.8%, has 68.8%, have all been denied housing. All the voucher holders who the government said, hey, we're trying to help people, we're trying to minimize the housing crisis, so let's increase the vouchers, let's increase the amounts of the voucher, let's open waiting lists, let's create more low-income housing for places. And this is saying that at least 75% in this testing were denied that right. Here it says the United States federal rental assistance fact is that at least 5.2 million families in America, 5.2 million American households are receiving rental assistance. But if you look to the right of that, it says 4 in 10 low-income people in the United States are homeless, or they pay over half of their income for rent. If you look at the bottom, it says that 20% of those households are households of seniors. 25% are of people who have disability, and 58% of families with children. We have to ask ourselves as citizens and of people, at least for me in Los Angeles, where the number is increasingly growing, how is this possible? How is this possible that the most vulnerable in our communities are being left hanging and we are left struggling? But if you go and look at the statistics of California, particularly in 2023, US News put out an article that says California is rated number 5 in the country's richest and wealthiest states. But in these statistics, it says that we have about 30% of the entire nation's homeless population here in California. The question is, how can we be the home of both? How can we be a home of 30% of the nation's homelessness, but also be one of the wealthiest states of the whole world practically, or at least for the country? So I just wanted to take a brief second. If anybody is feeling transparent and vulnerable enough to share at least 1 or 2 situations where they were homeless or were about to be homeless, that would be really helpful, as I have shared a few. But if not, it's totally fine. It's not required, but it would be nice to hear about sharing with us if you ever been homeless before and what was the factor that led to that experience.
Francesca has her hand up. Do you want her?
Yeah. I
Yes.
just wanted to talk about, I was homeless when I was 8 months pregnant and I had 2 children already. And it was very difficult to find an apartment because I was on disability. And, you know, like you have to show income to a landlord or a rental company 2.5 times the rent, or even sometimes 3 times the rent. So it was impossible for me to actually get an apartment. But what I had to do was I had to do something illegal and fraudulently docker my pay stubs to even get an apartment, because no one was taking my disability income. So it's like either you have to just be on the streets and be homeless, or you have to jump through hoops or do illegal things to even be able to secure, an apartment. And then the apartment that I got, it had mice, it had rats and roaches. So even, all that I went through trying to get this apartment, it's like and then like she said, when you come in the daytime, it looks fine. You don't see any of the roaches, you don't see the rats, you don't see anything. And even some places that I went to, they had just bombed and you could just see all the roaches on the floor. And it's like, why would they even be showing this to anybody? But this apartment looked like it was good. And once I moved in, I didn't have money to like move out or somewhere to go. Like, okay, I can't live here. We just had to live here with the roaches and rats. And I was still expected to pay the rent, $23.95 to the landlord, even though, he's like, oh, sorry, I'm working on it. And that's all that was done. We just had to be here with the roaches and rats. And I had to do what I had to do to secure this apartment, but I had to do something illegal because they wouldn't even rent to me. I tried to get Section 8. I tried to get different help, and that's what I had to resort to. So.
Thank you so much for sharing, Francesca. And I will just tell you guys, Francesca is my friend, and I did support her throughout that process of her homelessness. And I went through every option that was possible to help her secure housing. We looked for shelters, and we looked for everything that was possible to help her secure housing. Ultimately, she did let you know and share her story. And thank you again so much, Francesca, for sharing and being vulnerable with the group. But this is what housing can be like for many people, that no matter what you have to do to secure the housing, if you are not the people living on Skid Row who are just making encampments and living without paying the rent, then you are the people who are literally living and paying your whole check and everything that you have to secure housing. And you might just have to live with rats and roaches, even though you pay your whole paycheck to secure this housing. So then you start to question the people who are on Skid Row. Maybe it's easier for that than to use your whole income to pay for a place that's going to be infested and make living there uncomfortable in the first place. But thank you again, Francesca, for sharing. And if anybody else would like to share, I just ask that we kind of discuss it at the end of the presentation. Anyways, you can take a screenshot of this, but this was just some alarming key points to the Statista Research Department that was reported in June 2023. And it does say that California, Vermont, and Oregon rated the highest homeless population in 2022. And this graph here, this is just a picture that I took from HUD in one of their research development studies. And it starts to break down in category the people who experience homelessness in different ages and different stages, different races, but so many people are experiencing homelessness. So now we're going to talk a little bit about what is mental health. According to the CDC, mental health consists of emotional, psychological, and social well-being. It affects how we think, feel, and act. It also helps determine how we respond to stress, relate to others, and make healthy choices. Mental health is important in every stage of life, from childhood and adolescence through adulthood. So this is just a small video, and we're just gonna watch this video.
how someone feels just by looking at them or what they share online. To the outside world, our lives may look perfect, even if in reality they aren't. I'm always worrying about doing well at school, and with the end of year test coming up, I'm not sure how much longer I can cope. My thoughts swarm around my head, sometimes keeping me up all night. Some days it's just all too much, and I feel like I'm lost in space. When I did badly on one of my tests, I just about kept it together until I got home. Then I broke down crying in front of my mum. She listened for a bit, and then she told me that just like physical health, we all have mental health. It's our feelings, our thinking, our emotions, and our moods. She then said that feeling down, angry, and stressed is a normal part of life, just like it's normal to feel happy, confident, and carefree sometimes. We all have positive and negative emotions that come and go based on what's happening around us. These are everyday feelings. Good mental health means experiencing negative emotions. It's not always about being happy. Mum can relate to the feelings of stress. So when Mum suggested I take a break from everything and do something I enjoy, I actually took her advice. So I made myself a hot chocolate, snuggled up in a duvet and watched a film. You know what? Afterwards, I felt so much better. Mum should take her own advice.
Most of us only ever share the good things. We don't like to share how we really feel. Every morning when I wake up, negative thoughts stream through my head. Getting out of bed and pretending I'm okay takes all the energy I have. As the day goes on, negative thoughts turn from a stream into a river. The water rushes through my head so loudly it's hard to concentrate and listen. And some days it's so bad it feels like a waterfall that's trying to pull me over the edge. Everything is so overwhelming. I didn't think my friends would understand if I told them how down I was feeling. But when Sasha opened up to me about how stressed she was feeling, I told her. I wasn't sure how to bring up how I'd been feeling, so I started by saying that I didn't feel like myself. Just her listening made me feel like she understood. She told me some things that had helped her, so I tried them too, but it didn't make much of a difference. Even when I tried to be around my friends, I felt alone. The things I used to enjoy weren't fun anymore.
I was really worried about Andre and not sure what to do. He was quiet and wasn't hanging out with us like he used to. So I asked our head of year for some advice. He suggested I get Andre to speak to him since his negative feelings weren't going away.
I didn't want to speak to our head of year, but I also didn't want to keep feeling so down, so I went. He said that sometimes we have overwhelming feelings that can be more intense than our everyday feelings. These feelings hang around for a long time and change the way we feel, think, and behave. They can stop us doing what we want to in life. That's what I was going through. He also said that if we're physically unwell, we let people know, we ask for help. It should be no different with mental health. Sometimes our overwhelming feelings are brought on because of things in our life. Sometimes they happen for no reason at all. After hearing this, I felt much less alone and it felt good to talk. Scientists have found exercise can help when you're feeling low, so our head of year encouraged me to sign up to the school football club, which Sasha was already in. I still have days when the river is there, but now I'm beginning to understand my mental health. I'm learning how to cope. Our head of year reminded me that my friends, family, teachers, and lots of others at school are there to help just as much as he is. I had no idea the people around me could be so understanding. And while it's not always easy to talk about my mental health, the person I'm talking to might be able to help. If you don't feel like talking, that's fine. You could try writing, sports, reading, art, music, playing with your pet, whatever makes you feel better.
If you're the person someone talks to when they're struggling, just listen with no pressure or judgments. You don't have to have the answer. If you feel unsure about anything, you can speak to a trusted adult. Talking about mental health doesn't have to be difficult. After all, it's something we all have.
Thank you so much for sitting and watching that brief video. I just wanted to bring a little bit more awareness to what mental health was on a very basic but nice level for us all to see. And as the video said, we all have mental health, And it is just important to acknowledge that, especially when providing housing resources, because you never know what a person is going through mentally. So on this next slide is a fact about mental health and homelessness. There's a study from UC San Francisco found that 2/3 of homeless individuals experience mental health condition. Although income loss is a driving force behind the state's homeless crisis, it is more than half of those individuals who experience a mental health condition. Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Authority, also known as SAMHSA, 2023 report stated 21% of individuals experiencing homelessness reported having serious mental health disorders, and 16% reported having substance use disorders. Sorry. Americans with Disability Act is a federal law that prohibits discrimination against people with disabilities in everyday activities. The ADA identifies and protects people with disabilities, such as someone who has a physical or mental impairment that substantially limits one or more life activities and has a history or record of such an impairment, or is perceived by others as someone with such an impairment. So why are there so many people that are supposed to be protected by ADA experiencing homelessness? This is a major question. It's almost like some of our most vulnerable, the elderly, the youth, and disabled individuals who are being neglected as our protected class. Wouldn't we all say that where you live and how you live is considered an everyday activity? And if so, then why is it allowed that homeless people or homeless individuals who are, like we see in these statistics, they all, or majority of them, are experiencing some major mental health disorders and sometimes dual diagnosis? And you see Bart's eyes here. It's a real question. We have to give the side eye to that idea. Lack of awareness equals lack of support and protection. Housing is a human right, and it is a basic human need. I will say again that I have been on the Section 8 HACLA program for 12 years. And I have been more aware of my mental health in the last 5 years. And I will say and attest that this program that is government funded not only lacks the training, the people, the employees of the program lack the training and the awareness for mental health and what people experience and being more trauma informed. And therefore, participants such as myself who need the program and the employees and the people of that program to be aware, we suffer and have to jump through hoops explaining why we are experiencing a thing, how and why we are unable to make certain decisions or why we make certain decisions. And as we saw in the video, mental health and how we experience it is all different. And it could have a lot to do with how we make decisions or if we are even able to make decisions. In this next slide, I just want to let you know that there may be, I want to offer trigger warning because I'm going to share a video with a man who was a part of the Tenants Union with us, as I am a member of the Tenants Union. And this is an eviction that led to a suicide. And this is the news report about it. It's about 2 minutes. So I'm going to play the video and say trigger warning.
Yeah, let me set this up for you, getting out of the way. The building in question is the one you see on the right there in the corner. That is where sheriff deputies were serving the eviction. They hear a gunshot out of that apartment. And if you look, that building is right across from the freeway. So they immediately had to close everything down, including the freeway, which was crazy. Here's what happened. Let me show you. LA County Sheriff teams surround an apartment building off Cahuenga in Hollywood where an eviction notice escalates into a standoff. Deputies knock on the resident's door.
A door knock, asked them to come to the door. And when they did that, that's when they heard the gunshot.
Deputies quickly retreat. The 101 freeway is shut down where it goes by the apartment building, which is evacuated. Residents telling us they saw an eviction notice posted on the apartment door a few days ago.
Most of the correspondence would sit on his door for like a couple weeks. When I saw the eviction notice, I thought, oh, he's probably already split.
Most believe a recent 7% rent increase was the catalyst.
That's going to become more and more common now that the eviction moratorium's over or ending.
Sheriffs who serve eviction notices in LA County say they are running into more problems.
Quite a few high-risk evictions, yes. You know, high risk, where people have made threats, people are uncooperative.
Sound of flashbangs and gas canisters being deployed by SWAT as they try to contact a resident, eventually finding a body inside the apartment, which doesn't surprise too many people here.
It's tough out right now.
I think in the times we're living in that nothing surprises me, sadly.
When it's a recession, it's we just got out of 2 years of whatever that was.
If you were evicted tomorrow,
I you know, a lot of people don't know where they're going to go. The housing problem is such an issue.
a lot of people from other buildings here and businesses telling us they're getting rent increases 7 and 8%. It makes sense because California's rent hikes are tied to inflation. You know where that has been going. Even when you have rent control, depending on the age of the building or where you are, quite a few people getting as much as 10%. Now, in terms of this situation, this man has yet to be identified. The freeway is reopened, but you can see that it's still a nightmare, as it usually is at this time of day in this area. Anyway, it's even worse. I'm Christina Gonzalez, live in the Hollywood Hills. Back to you in the studio.
All right.
Thank you so much for bearing that video with me. It's always a bit hard for me to watch because I don't understand why an eviction, number one, would even be legal. We really need to consider why eviction is legal. If the housing crisis is such a crisis, why is it that the government is allowing for evictions for more people to be on the street? And in this case, this man chose suicide over being evicted. And this is a scenario of why housing and mental health have to be closely considered in all ways. We must deeply consider what needs to be reconsidered. Addressing mental health while offering housing opportunities can not only provide stability to the physical being, but prioritizes the protection and the well-being of the inner being. We cannot continue to offer one without the other because statistics has shown how the concept of addressing them individually has not stopped the rapid increase in the housing crisis, nor the rapid increase in the health crisis. Housing and mental health, like love and marriage, we cannot have one without the other. I have said that we do have an organization that is autonomous. It's called the Los Angeles Tenants Union, and I am a member and one of the facilitators of this group. And I just completed my peer support training. So I, as a leader of the community and very passionate about mental health and the struggle of fighting from being homeless, I am a go-to person in my community. Many people, family and friends, including my friend Francesca, who was a part of this presentation, people call me as a go-to person in the community because I have learned my rights. I have learned how to navigate systems and to prevent myself from being homeless. And I participate in other people's struggle in trying to prevent becoming homeless. The Los Angeles Tenants Union is an autonomous housing movement completely funded by its members to keep our community free from eviction and gentrification. With the tenant union organizing, our efforts to unify our housing first mission has been expanding globally as we have participated in several brigades, including the Power to the People Brigade in Venezuela in July 2023. So as I said, this autonomous organization, it's funded by its members. And in July 2023, we took a brigade to Venezuela. And although I'm not sure if you know much about politics, but I won't get too much into that in this presentation. But Venezuela has been cut off from much of its resources over the last few years. And despite its lack of resources, they have built 4 million homes for the country in the last 4 years, 4 million homes. So as we toured through Venezuela, we saw that majority of the country has a home, and housing is a human right. The land belongs to the people in Venezuela, and it was very encouraging coming back home and seeing that as a country that is not voted number 5 in the leading wealthiest place, it still has been able to maintain and to continuously build housing for the people of the land. There are about 15 local chapters throughout the greater Los Angeles, and participation is always welcome. LATU is not a one-stop shop in the housing crisis, considering majority of members are housed, but it is a step in the right direction to minimize the ones that are housed from becoming unhoused. I share my journey with others in hopes that they'll be strong in the midst of struggle and uncertainties, as I have for majority of my life. To see change, we must fight for change. In unity, always remembering to love thy neighbors as thyself and treat people with kindness, because you never know what they are going through mentally. There is an article posted about my most recent fight against illegal eviction that was posted in the Yes magazine. And this is that article. I am able to provide the link in the chat if you're interested to read it at a later time. But the fight with the last landlord where I lived on 90th and Figueroa, the neighborhood with the failing crime rate, this story was put in an article, and I would be happy to share that with you all. Yeah, thank you for being a friend to me, for participating in this presentation. However you participate in the community, wherever you participate in the community, continue to be a part of the community. It is greatly needed in order to see change. And as I am concluding this, I would ask if anybody has questions to please raise your hand, comments, concerns, or anything. I am happy to ask. And I see now Larry has his hand up.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
That's not him. It's either her or they.
Her, or I apologize.
No problem. I would just like to say something about mental health and housing. I volunteer at Share Downtown, and one of the things I do is housing placement. And almost all the time, people who come in the door, who walk in, who need housing, they've got 3 things going on. They're homeless, they have mental health issues, and substance use issues. And every one of those issues contributes to the problems they have with the other 2. Okay. The psychiatric problems they have are intricately intertwined with the substance use problems that they have. And the homelessness they experience on the street is so deeply traumatic, it contributes to both the mental health and substance use issues. So it's very difficult for me to place people in housing because well, I'll just take Share Collaborative Housing. You can't use drugs or alcohol in Share Collaborative Housing. So, right there. And there's other housing available that isn't share housing. And we're not even talking about Section 8. That's a long-term thing. I'm talking about getting people off the street. A lot of people downtown are so, shall we say, disruptive that they get thrown out of wherever they're at. And it's very difficult to house people. It's like they need mental health and substance use treatment before they need housing, but before they can get that, they need housing. So anyway, that's the difficulty I have downtown.
Thank you so much, Larry. And my apologies for mispronouncing your pronouns again. But I will say that, yes, that is the issue. And that is the question and the concern that I have for the group and for the state and for the government and for the world is how do we eliminate one without addressing the other? It's impossible. They have to be collectively addressed. And although we have shared collaborative housing and we have HOPICS, and we have HACLA, and we have all these agencies that are offering one, they're offering them in different ways where you cannot address the two. In all respects to shared collaborative housing, we have to be mindful that there are people who are on the street, but yes, they have these dual diagnoses. And sometimes once you have a a substance abuse disorder, and you have a mental health disorder, and then you're homeless, the homelessness almost becomes a disorder in itself. And so we have to say, how can we address all three with respects, like I said, to all the programs that are offering housing? It's a disservice to the community to offer the housing without having an outlet on how do we address the mental health and the substance abuse disorder all in one, without saying we cannot offer you housing until you get this together, because we know in order to get those things together, we do have to address the housing. But thank you so much, Larry. Annette, I see your hand.
Okay, yes. Can you hear me? Oh, yeah. So my question is, how are you bridging the gap as far as making linkages to your clients and getting them that housing service? What is it that you're doing to get your client housing? Are you just simply advocating for them? Because like I work for Santa Clara County, and I think the only thing that I can do really is just advocate for the parent, like, and say, you know, there should not be no children living in a car. This parent should get services and get them out of, you know, and I think just by saying that, it kind of pushes them to do it. But still, there should be like a priority, like, you know, you were saying. I work with a mental health support worker at KidScope for Santa Clara County, and just helping the parents with linkages to let them know what these linkages are to strengthen their resilience to these services. But when it comes to housing, how can they focus on getting services for their child as far as doctor's appointments and whatnot, when they're too busy worried about where they're going to sleep tonight? You know, that's a priority. So how are you, or how are you bridging that gap to make them a priority? How are you doing that?
Thank you so much, Annette. For myself, I am not a part of any major organization outside of the Los Angeles Tenants Union, and we are a bunch of tenants helping each other to prevent being homeless. So as a now trained peer support specialist, I am trained in helping my peers with mental health recovery and substance abuse recovery. But the reason why I decided to make this presentation is because I know that the world is not doing enough to make sure that we're addressing all these things at the same time. So the question that you have is the same question that I had and that I have. And I can tell you that as a community leader, I am advocating for myself. I'm doing that first so that I can pave the way and I can see what is necessary to help those around me. But that's really all that I can do. And as people call, like my friend Francesca and many other people, I'm standing right there. I'm frontlining against people who are experiencing eviction, whether English speaking or Spanish speaking. I'm literally out there with a little device that I brought off Amazon to make sure that even if somebody's standing by me, my comrade who is Spanish speaking, that is like, hey, I'm sick. My daughter is sick. The landlord can't come in, and the landlord is putting notices on door and saying, hey, these people won't let me come into their apartment because I need to do repairs and they won't let me in. And then I go to talk to the tenant and they're saying, hey, we're sick, we're experiencing this is why they can't come in. And we advocate. Like you said, the biggest thing right now as individuals is being a part of your community, going out to speak with your public, your councilman members, and express these concerns to the council members so that they can understand what's happening in the districts that they're responsible for, joining the Los Angeles Tenants Union and learning, and just joining organizations that are going to help, but we can't do it by ourselves. So it's great to hear that people like yourself and myself are doing things, but it is going to take a more of a collective. Like, the power of the people is the people becoming together. And so the best that you can do is to bring more awareness to the efforts that you're taking, and to continue to be a part of conversations like this. Did that kind of help answer your question a little bit?
Yeah, I thought I was gonna get the magical answer today.
I wish I had it. It's that golden ticket concept. I mean, yeah, the golden ticket concept again. We don't have it, but it would be a beautiful thing. And I think that it's coming. The world is revolving, but we just have to make those collective efforts.
Yes. I do have to say though, that our county is working on getting, the unhoused housed, and then focusing on their mental health and their recovery. So I do have to give credit to our county for that. Being dirty, as far as on drugs, is not first priority. So that I have to give them credit for. And that's just now changing, I believe, because they want to, of course, that our state got a grant to get the unhoused house. So I know that that's probably one of the main reasons why this is happening. But I specifically was asking for parents who are not on drugs, who are just learning that their child has a learning disability, or getting their child getting assessed for behavioral health issues. They're the parents are needing that support, because like I was saying earlier, how can they focus on their child and getting the medical help for their child when they're too busy worried about where they're going to sleep tomorrow night or tonight. So how can they get priority over somebody else? It's like, I wish there was like a fund where they could refer that client to the other department, Office of Supportive Housing, to have to be put at the top of the list, or at least a section, where they can get those children off the streets. It's not just a child, not just an adult, it's a family. So that's what I wish I could see happening, but like, it's a long haul.
No buts, Annette. We're working on that collective
Yes.
effort, and you are one step towards that. And everybody who is a part of this chat and listening to the conversation is a part of it. So absolutely, there are no buts. We are hopeful, and keep building that initiative. Keep spreading the word of why it's important. As you said, children are not families of their own. They have parents, and they are directly affected by the circumstances that the family, the parents experience. I was homeless for a while and still am. I'm at a friend's house now, so I am still homeless. And for a long time, my son struggled in school, and he did not get a chance to go to doctor's appointments because, as you said, the housing struggle was the first thing. And I also was dealing with dual diagnosis, really tri-diagnosis, because it's homeless, it's substance abuse disorder, and mental health disorder. So fight on. To motto. Am I saying that right, Jess?
You
Morrow?
can just call him Mo.
Mo.
Maybe you want to take Jean first. I think Jean had.
Okay, Jean.
Thank you very much. I live in the Los Angeles area, and it really is an overwhelming problem. And I do think that housing is a right. Just three real brief comments. There was an article in the Los Angeles Times that I saw that talked about when people get housed, sometimes people with different disorders have a difficult time and get evicted maybe because they're messy and they don't know how to throw away foods and things. And there's a program, and I don't know how to access it, where they are using occupational therapists out there with the people that are housed to help them learn and keep them on top of keeping a home and what it means. That's number one. Something completely separate is that you are absolutely right. It's the squeaky wheel that gets the grease, and you need to go to your council meetings or get somebody to go to your council meetings and be loud. And you'd be shocked at what they don't want to hear it, so that they really will. The squeaky wheel is very, very important. And there was a third thing that I forgot. So thank you very much. I respect your journey.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Hello, this is Mauro.
Go ahead.
Can you hear me?
Mo.
I had the setup kind of off. Erica, thank you very much for addressing this. And, you know, I have some of that experience as well regarding homelessness and mental health and substance use and so forth, and so be it. And so my journey kind of carries a very much, you know, born and raised here kind of thing, and coming from immigrant family, immigrant parents who, you know, at the end of the day, for me, they were, you know, it was a dysfunctional family situation. And resources that I kind of, I actually work here at Share. So they were a big, you know, probably the only resource that was available for me to get housed at that time, you know. And so I hope that like the journey and the places where I've been able to live and stay through what Share is doing right now is probably like you know, what I was given with the hotel vouchers at the Department of Social Services for a couple of nights here and there, you know, living in a place where it's like, you know, you could just tell it's like crime is way up there and whatever's going on, you know, and with yeah, everything I've experienced, everything you talked about. So, you know, I started from a little, you know, community in gang infested in those days to a nicer community, and then just dealing with a lot of dysfunction in my life and things of this nature. But I hope that we can work, like, once again, you know, for me, the solution was definitely focusing on, yeah, experiencing security of a place to stay for one, and then tackling the mental health stuff that I was dealing with throughout that time within that experience, you know. So altogether, this is exactly, I think you're on a really good path with regards to combining those things. And the support group systems have been really, really, really big for me too. So I hope that with your peer specialist training, I mean, that was just huge for me as well. So I hope that you know, sometimes government stuff is really, you know, like, it's like the cheese that they give out, not so good. You know, and so it's like sometimes I think it takes resources like outside of the box thinking, which I feel like that's why I'm working here. You know, this is a place where we can, you know, maybe come up with solutions with a bunch of ideas coming in, where we can find answers that make sense, you know. And that's pretty much it. Thank you so much for tackling this one.
Yeah, thank you so much for participating and joining and giving comment. And I will say that, yes, you are absolutely right. It takes efforts, many efforts. And I am just passionate about this. I mean, I've experienced homelessness even before I was an adult. And so I was a runaway when I was in the foster care system, and homes and people that didn't make me feel welcome, I ran away. And so I introduced myself to homelessness by saying I refuse to be in a place that doesn't show me love and won't show me support. But my introduction to that, it was then dramatically stretched by society. And so I have a dedication to my community and to myself and to my family to share awareness about mental health and about what is causing mental health to increase, and how protecting people in their housing, people who are housed, working class citizens who are in their home fighting to stay in their home, why it is so important that we protect these people so that that increasing and the rapidly increasing housing crisis does not continue to grow. So everybody has to do their part. This is a community effort. And as a peer support specialist and as a community leader, I am dedicated to this. I will use my voice and the resources that I have, including sharing and telling people like my friend Francesca how to get those resources to keep their families housed. But do we have anybody else that has any questions or concerns? I seen in the chat that there was questions about me sharing the slides, which I would be absolutely happy to do so. So if Jess would be so kind as to help me with that by taking the emails of those who are interested, and we will get those to you ASAP.